Well, hey, welcome to A Valid Answer with Scott and Marshall. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you?
Good. This is our Valid Answer Mondays. We are here on Mondays at 4, right here on currentcast.com. This is where you can hear a capitalist conservative Christian and a socialist liberal atheist have talks about things happening in the news, philosophy, religion, all that other stuff that goes on. And so tell me a little bit about what's been happening in the news or what's been happening with you. I'm going to get this all sorted out real quick here.
Well, as you'll notice, I don't have my iPad today. I completely...
And he doesn't have water, which apparently I'm supposed to provide for him.
Right.
He's a socialist. He thinks I'm supposed to provide all of that for him. And he's all, where's my water today? And I'm like...
That's right,
Bring your own.
Yeah, so there you go. There you go. I have to go out and work for it now.
Yeah, look at that. So, heaven forbid.
Probably going to have to riot. But anyway...
Because that's how you get things in socialism. You don't earn it; you riot for it.
That's a form of earning if it works, right?
It's a form of stealing, but sure.
Social Security.
There's some burglars and robbers who do a lot of work to break into somebody's house. So I guess you're saying they earned it, huh?
Well, if you're passionate about something, you should really pursue your passion.
Yeah, I'm in the process right now of we've written and now we're producing and breaking down the script and stuff like that for this feature film, and that we're going to be shooting in June. I'm going to be taking a few weeks and shooting this feature film. But one of the lines is well, this kid's trying to follow his passion, and his friends, just because you're passionate about it doesn't mean you won't suck.
Wow. Wow. The formula for success is to do something as often as you eat, whatever it may be. And if you do something with that frequency within just a few weeks, you'll actually be better than the average Joe at whatever it is you're doing. After a few months, you'll probably be at least in the top 10%, if not the top 95 or higher. And you do it for so many years, you'll be one of the very best in the world, whatever it is.
I could probably make an inappropriate joke right now, but probably as the pastor, I shouldn't.
Well,
anyway.
All right. So, if your passion is making inappropriate jokes, well, there you go.
Well, hey, there was something that happened back in January. One of our first episodes. You brought a prop. You brought
a magic 8
ball.
A
magic 8 ball, and we made some predictions for 2019. And one of your predictions is getting close to coming up to date. You had made a prediction of something that would happen in the first quarter of 2019, and we're coming up on completing that in a few days here at the end of March. You were saying by the end of March or early April, what was going to happen? What was your prediction?
I think the Mueller report was going to come in, and Trump was going to be on his way out.
Ousted or resigned or impeached or just did it matter?
I
can't remember
I don't think I got into any kind of detail as far as how it was going to happen. I just said it was probably going to happen. It was based on the fact that the Mueller investigation was probably going to be finished sometime before the end of spring. And I was assuming... It was
based on hopes?
Well, I was assuming, like a lot of people, that it was going to result in some sort of criminal charges or evidence of criminal activity on the behalf of Donald Trump. And of course, that didn't come to pass. So it's over. It was all fake news, I guess.
Was it? So let's look at that. What exactly? Because I actually did not follow this probably as much as you did. What was it? What were they trying to find, or what did they think was there? Could anybody make an accusation and this sort of investigation be started over baseless accusations? What is the determining factor that why this had to be investigated, and what were they actually going after?
Well, as I understand, Trump had a lot of business connections in Russia, and there was a plan to build a new Trump Tower, I think, in Moscow. And we know
would it be called
the
Trump Tower?
Right. We know that the Russians did in fact interfere in our election process.
In what way?
Through social media.
Social media,
they purchased social media campaigns. They sent out literally paid trolls. They hired paid trolls. We don't know if they were stationed in Russia or elsewhere, but they went on, and
they could be anywhere.
Purpose was to deliberately sow dissent, especially among Democrats, and it was actually fairly effective because you had a lot of Democrats who were going at each other's throats, especially the Bernie Sanders, the Bernie-crats, if you will, who were very upset. Who were constantly stoked and stirred up, myself being one of them, by the fact that Hillary Clinton had essentially locked in the nomination before the race had really even started.
Yeah.
And so this was, to many people, this felt very dirty and underhanded, undemocratic, which
Do you think that was caused by the Russians?
No. What you have is the Russians capitalizing on Americans kind of, doing shady backroom dealing and cutting out, what the American people really want.
Was there a specific, do people believe that there was a specific intent that the Russians wanted Trump to win, or they just wanted to interfere and cause chaos? What's the consensus?
Yeah, I don't think we really know. The Russians could have just been testing something to see, hey, let's see how this works. Let's see.
I'm an agent of chaos.
Right? Well, it makes sense, right? Because
some people just want to watch the world burn.
If you figure out how to influence a national election through social media, that's a powerful ability.
Mm-hmm.
That's as powerful as having a weapon or anything else. War is simply politics by other means. At the end of the day, it's all about the politics, and it's like a big game of poker. And if you have this, ace card in the hole that you can influence an election, you can ensure then that more often than not, a pro-Russian candidate is the one who gets elected to office. And that's pretty powerful, So it makes sense that the Russians would do this. How many times have we as the United States interfered in world political affairs?
None. What are you talking about?
Right? It's more like the order of the day. It's like the norm. So, but anyway, you basically have Trump's business dealings with the Russians. At the same time, the Russians are interfering with our election. And I think that's a logical question.
Mm-hmm.
Is Trump responsible? Did he work with the Russians in some way to win himself the election? And I think at the end of everything, despite many indictments and criminal charges against people beneath him who are doing things like obstructing justice and lying, the end result is there's nothing that connects to Trump, and there's nothing that suggests that Trump actually worked with the Russians to manipulate the election. There's just simply no evidence.
So how did this start? Was there enough at the beginning? Can anybody make a claim and this type of investigation will be launched?
I don't know what the initial evidence was. It may have all simply been circumstantial. Like, wow, this looks really suspicious, so let's dig into it. I know that they met with people, Russians in Trump Tower, so it looks suspicious. If it walks like a duck, it talks like a duck, and quacks like a duck, if you will. It's probably a duck, right?
And if it floats, and if it floats, it's wood, and it's not a witch. But if it sinks, it's
Monty
a witch.
Python here, yeah. But
you mentioned a duck. Sorry,
right? So ultimately, I don't know what the initial case was that they managed to cobble together. But obviously, people from the Trump campaign did meet with people who were also Russian agents. But at the end of the day, there's no smoking gun evidence.
Goodness, you just dropped something on the floor.
What was that? Oh, that was... Oh, yep. My heartburn pills there.
Apparently, this news has hit you hard, and you're
Right,
you're
I'm
having
just
heartburn, and you
chewing
really wanted there to be, because right now, like CNN and like
they're beside themselves.
The Democrats, it's like it's like election night all over again. Everybody's crying and and falling over themselves, and like so taking this to the next level. If this is in fact something that was completely trumped up. Sorry, I had to go.
What's going on with the bad jokes, folks?
I don't know
how to stop this.
I don't know.
Stop him before he kills again.
But if there really was, if this turns out that there really was nothing there and it was a witch hunt, what should happen next? I mean, I know that I heard that Lindsey Graham is now wants to start a new investigation now to look into who started this investigation and for what reasons. Is that? Do you think, your opinion? Do you think it is proper? Do you think it's the right thing to do to then go after people who made false accusations, or is that opening up a door to silencing people in the future?
Congress has a responsibility to investigate if there's evidence of a crime.
Yep.
On the part of any elected official or any public official, Congress has that responsibility, and that includes the president.
Is a false investigation a crime?
There is a difference, I think, between a false investigation and a legitimate investigation that exonerates the defendant. If you go and you find out, you know what, okay, we just got the wrong guy, or there's really nothing here.
Yeah.
They have to be able to ask questions and get to the bottom of things, because we, the people, deserve the truth.
Yeah.
And it's critical that our democracy run with some level of transparency, so that we can actually preserve our democracy, which is hilarious because it's basically dead. But at the end of the day, I think we want to encourage these investigative processes. The problem is, I think the news cycle got a hold of it. The media got a hold of it and latched onto it.
Yeah.
And a lot of people said, when this comes down, Trump is going to go away. He's going to go down hard. He's going to end up in prison, and there's going to be much rejoicing, if you will.
Yeah.
And that just didn't pay off. And so now people are just pulling their hair out. It's like, the Temple of Jerusalem has been captured by the Philistines, and people are just all in tears. And, well, what do you expect? So
when they place so much of their hopes on something that wasn't real.
Right. Exactly. So it's a done deal. And so now this changes a lot of things. First of all, it changes the calculus for Donald Trump, because had there been some evidence he had done something wrong, it's not entirely certain that he would have been impeached.
Right.
Even the Democrats said, we're probably not going to pursue
And
impeachment.
And impeachment is still, and this has nothing to do with impeachment. The Democrats could, if they want to, still do that. That's still a legal option.
Right. But at the end of the day, nobody honestly believed that Trump was going to leave office unless there was hard smoking gun evidence that he did something really, really bad.
Yeah, and illegal.
Yeah. And with the exception of that, nobody was going to push him out of office, because he's part of that establishment. And why is the establishment ultimately going to destroy one of its own? What people, I think, don't understand is that Republicans and Democrats are all playing for the same team. And they're playing you and I.
Tell us about this, because this is something that you keep bringing up. That
I do.
Yeah, tell us about this, and this might end up being something that might be eye-opening, everyone. So pay attention.
Well, I think the way I summarize it often is the right wing and the left wing belong to the same bird. Here's the deal:
but not the extreme.
Well, no, there are people on the extreme right and left who are not part of that establishment.
Yeah.
But Republicans and Democrats are essentially one party, and it's a centrist party, and it's a corporate party.
That's the key.
It's about Wall Street. It's not about the people. And all of these issues that they pitch at you, from, let's say, abortion to immigration to universal health care, are just to persuade you to vote for them. Because if, let's say, universal health care were so important to Democrats, and I know they've been talking about this since the early 90s when we were teenagers. Hillary Clinton was actually appointed to look into universal health care and health care reform. I remember all of that.
As the first lady, that was like her thing. Yeah.
And if the Democrats truly wanted universal health care, they could have implemented it when they had control of the House, the Senate, and the White House under Obama, and they simply didn't do it. If Republicans had really wanted to build a border wall to somehow manage immigration, they could have done it in the first 2 years of the Trump presidency.
When they had everything.
When they had, again, the House, the Senate, and the White House. To the extent that these people have not done these things, it suggests very powerfully to me that they are not interested in actually solving these issues. You and I are polar opposites on a lot of issues. Take, for example, our abortion episode that we did. I think we did that back in January.
Yeah, it was a few episodes ago. Watch it. It's pretty hot, but at the same time, like what you're about to say, there was some common ground that we were able to actually land on.
Exactly, and that's the crazy thing here, right? You and I are complete opposite ends of the spectrum politically, ideology, theologically, and yet we were able to reach some kind of reasonable middle ground where we could both coexist. And I have this hypothesis: you could take pretty much any two average Joe Americans, or Janes, if you will. It could be any two Americans.
Gosh, why'd you have to be so sexist?
Right? I don't want to be sexist. So just any two Americans, and you
why just Americans? Anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
And you sit them down over a pizza and a pitcher of beer, and you give them a notepad and a pen and an hour or two.
The beer will be flying, the pizza will be thrown across the room, and they'll be crawling on the floor, beating each other up.
And at the end of a couple hours, and
that might be the first 30 minutes.
Yeah, but at the end of all that, I would bet you virtually 100% of those pairs would walk away with some kind of deal or compromise or solution to all of these problems that we face. Because at the end of the day, the problems are simply not as complex as they make
I mean,
them.
how many of these problems have you and I solved ourselves?
Well, on this show, we've been going for over a year, and we've solved it.
Because we're geniuses. We're freaking geniuses. This show needs to get out there. They need to listen to what we're saying.
Yes.
Can solve all the problems in the world right here on A Valid Answer.
Well, we can show people a way forward. I'm not saying that, obviously the devil's in the details, but at the end of the day, we certainly agree on the broad strokes. For example, I'm very pro-immigration. You might be less so, or rather you are certainly anti-illegal immigration. Well, guess what? I happen to be anti-illegal immigration.
And I happen to be very pro-immigration.
So at the end of the day, we both agree that a nation has the right to secure its borders. And if the Border Patrol asks for a wall on certain sections of the border, we don't think that's necessarily unreasonable when we're trying to manage the flow of immigration into the country, especially when you do have people bringing over drugs.
Yeah.
However, I also feel that people should be allowed to seek asylum, that you should never violate human rights under any circumstances whatsoever. So at the end of the day, I would give you your wall, but then you would give me certain assurances that people's rights would be respected.
Well, I personally believe in that particular argument. I personally believe it's ridiculously hard to do it the right way, and it shouldn't be that hard. The fact that it is so difficult to try to come in the right way and become an immigrant in the United States legally, that the fact that that's so difficult to do encourages illegal immigration. It should not be that difficult to do, because I personally believe that immigrants coming in to make a better life for themselves is part of what makes America great. That's part of it.
There you go. Okay.
That's it. But people breaking the rules and sneaking in does not.
No, and I agree.
Yeah.
A nation has the right to manage its immigration.
Yeah.
I don't.
So we can find that's an example of, even though that discussion was pretty heated on our show, it can come down to this is the middle ground where we meet.
And so why can't our professional elected officials, whose only purpose in life is to solve these problems, not solve these problems? I mean, immigration has probably been an argument since forever, since the beginning of the United States. It's certainly been a major political issue since you and I can remember, going certainly back to the 80s and Ronald Reagan and amnesty for aliens and stuff like that. And it's still a major hot topic today. And so the only logical conclusion is they don't want to solve the problem. And we need to stop looking to the people who create the problem and expecting them to solve it. Because guess what? Newsflash, they're not. They're not interested in solving the problem. They're not interested in you or me. They're interested in themselves.
How disingenuous do you think they are? Do you think that it is literally as deep as, okay, well, I am going to be on this side of this side, and you're going to be on that side, and these are the arguments that we're going to say against each other? Do you think it's that deep, or do you think, to the point where they literally don't believe in anything and could be on either side?
How many anti-gun representatives end up concealed carry?
Nearly all.
Yeah, exactly. And
is that a well, we could choose either side, or is that I believe I'm better than the average person?
No, I think they choose their side when they're young or they're starting out. It's very rare that you have a case of a representative or someone who switched sides. That does happen. It's very uncommon. But ultimately, I think they get in, they plug themselves into the machine, which is the Democratic Party, the DNC, or the Republican Committee, or whatever, the Republican Party, and then they just play along their whole life. And
do you think the machine eats up good people?
All the time.
Do you think there are good people who went in there?
That's the purpose of the machine. I literally think that is the purpose of the machine.
So how do we shut this machine down?
Okay, so here's the thing. Donald Trump, Bernie Sanders, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, I would like to believe they are not part of those machines.
I think
I know Democrats are losing their mind because I threw Trump in.
But I, for the most part, the people who wanted Trump to win were the people who really wanted somebody who was from the outside and not part of the machine. The greatest disappointment for those people is to see that he came in and basically became the machine.
Well, he's a rentier, so he's going to support corporate capitalism. That's in his own self-interest.
Yeah.
You have people like Bernie Sanders who are renegades. They're renegades to the left. Certainly the mainstream Democrats do not like Bernie Sanders.
Yeah.
Because he has always been an independent, and he has always been a renegade, and he has always bucked the norm on many issues. He's also been ahead of his time, very progressive.
But
And
he's
we're
also
seeing that.
become a multimillionaire while being a politician.
I don't know the details of all of that, and certainly I would be dismayed if that were absolutely true, depending on how he earned that money. But then you have people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who is simply a bartender, who worked as part of his campaign back in 2016 and said, this is ridiculous, I'm going to go ahead and run. She's actually very well educated, fairly intelligent, certainly young, certainly a freshman, certainly she's made some gaffes. But so too has our President of the United States and many others. And at the end of the day, I think you're going to see a new crop of politicians who are not plugged into this machine. And in fact, that's their selling point. That's how they're going to appeal to the voters. They're going to say, vote for me. I'm not a member of the establishment.
But haven't people like that come and gone already and got eaten up by the machine?
Not that I can know, not that I know of off the top of my head. It's possible, but I can't think of any. Bernie Sanders, for whatever reason, has managed to survive.
But look on the opposite side. All the what was it, 2012? The Tea Party came in with this big intent, and nothing ever really happened with it. Most of them eventually got defeated again, or just became part of the machine.
Well, the Tea Party was part of the machine. It was just a part of the far right machine, but a lot of them were still bought and paid for by corporate interests. They were advocates for corporate interests. They wanted minimal government control, which allows corporations to increase their control and their power and their profits and so on. And the end result is what you have right now, which is where apparently it is individual taxes now make up the largest share of income of tax receipts for the government rather than corporate taxes. So corporations are now paying so little in taxes that the individual taxpayers of the United States, the 330 million of us who live here, are now paying the lion's share, or I should say the majority, of federal taxes.
And a good portion of those don't pay any taxes.
That's right, which means really it's more like half to a third of all Americans are carrying the bulk of the tax burden.
And that's why a lot of them are like, why am I paying for this? But you're saying the question should be directed at the corporations, not at the other half that's not paying.
Well, I think the thing is, people do pay taxes. Even the half that don't pay, they pay sales taxes. They purchase things. They pay taxes in other ways.
Yeah, property taxes if they own something or anything like that, yeah.
But I really think there's so much wealth concentrated at the top. I'm not saying that we shouldn't go after those people at the bottom and make them into contributors. I do want them to be contributing, tax-paying members of society. So I'm going to put that out there first. But I really think it would behoove us more to go after the people at the top, the corporations, corporations like Amazon and Apple and so on, who have perhaps even as much as $1 trillion in assets on the book. There's all these corporations. I think there's something like $4 or $5 trillion held offshore in tax havens by American corporations. I really expected Trump to bring a good portion of that money home. I'm really disappointed he hasn't done that.
He has done some, more than other presidents before him, bring a lot of that back.
If I were president, I would say we're going to give you a tax holiday. You bring it back, but 25% you have to put into government bonds. And then we're going to use those government bonds to rebuild the country, to build our infrastructure. And I, Donald Trump, the great builder that I supposedly am, am going to personally make that my pet project. It's going to be Eisenhower Part 2. Yeah. And if he had done that, he would have been the greatest president that America had probably had since certainly Ronald Reagan or before. Not
Josh
that
has
Ronald
a question.
Reagan was so great, but people tend to lionize him in memory.
Josh has a question in that, and I'm not quite sure if you can help me out with this. He says he got the impression earlier that I was not pro-corporate a few minutes ago. Is that the case? I'm not quite sure what the question is. What do you think the question on that is? Because I'm obviously I'm pro business, but the whole reason why a business needs to be treated as an individual, I'm leery on. You know, that whole idea of, I understand that, you know, as a business, and again, I'm thinking as an entrepreneur, I'm thinking as a business creator, I'm thinking as a person who goes through all this and starts a business and does all this, for them to not be able to control what their business does. I feel is very unfair and unjust. But now when you're thinking about corporations have that now it's not an individual anymore. Does a corporation need to have protections of an individual, and the tax, especially the tax protections that they seem to have on there? I'm not sure. I don't know enough detail on those. I am pro business and pro corporate as far as like it being a business driving, but yeah, he's saying I seem to agree about the dubious influence of. Oh yeah, I always know that there's a dubious influence of corporate power. If that's what you're talking about. Yes, I've always known that. I just think it's a problem with the political system and less of a problem with the businesses. That the political system allows the businesses to do that. That you got to, exactly, and so you need to reduce the power of government, not reduce the freedoms of businesses. That's my take on it. Is yes, I understand the corporations influence politics, and I don't like that. I don't want that. But taking freedoms away from corporations and taking freedoms away from businesses is not what I would rather see. A smaller government that's less likely to have power appropriated by a business. That the more power you give a government, effectively more power you're giving to the businesses that control it.
Whereas, I see the more power you're giving to business, the more power you're giving to business.
Yeah, which business does not have the same power over you that government can.
Yeah, well, you'd be surprised.
And every example you've ever given has been business partnered with government.
But let's talk about that for a moment, right? Your employer can fire you if you say something negative about the corporation. If your employer fires you, you lose your health care benefits because your health care, if you have it at all, is paid for by your employer in this country. If your employer lets you go, your employer can decide whether or not you get unemployment benefits or whether or not you have to fight for those benefits, or maybe you do just get them or you don't get them at all. If your business fires you, it's your home and your mortgage or your rent that goes unpaid. So when you think about it, at the end of the day, your boss, who can determine whether or not you can date your coworker, whether or not even you can bring your dog to work, of all weird things, or how you should dress when you come on the job. Sometimes there's a legitimate reason for a dress code on a job. Other times, less so. But it's your employer, I think, who has a much greater impact on your day-to-day life. Only because you accepted those restrictions. If you did not like those restrictions, you didn't take the job and you took a job somewhere else. Whereas when it comes to government, there is no other option. That's the difference that seems to be lost on you so much. But what I'm trying to tell you is that for a lot of people, the options between A, B, C, D through Z look very much alike. Work in the fast food industry, whether you work for McDonald's or Taco Bell or Burger King
then get out of the fast food industry.
Okay, but then where do you go? You go to the restaurant industry. Maybe you have a certain skill set. Wherever you go, at the end of the day, your boss, I feel, is going to have more impact on your day-to-day life than your central government.
Right, but it can always change. That's the thing. You can always choose to change it, where it's once it goes to government power, there is no longer any choice. Once it's law, there is no choice. Well, you can choose your job. You can choose to be self-employed. You can choose where you're going to work. You have the power and the ability to change your own fate when it's not the law.
There's an old saying about that. There's an old saying. It goes, meet the new boss, same as the old boss. So you can change your boss. Yeah. Same as the old boss.
Yeah, I did change my boss, and I'm in a better working environment because of that. Okay. I chose where I wanted to work. I'm not trying to put down anybody, but I'm saying I've made you're not saying that anywhere you've gotten better at your job. You've never gotten increase in pay or better benefits when you moved from one job to another. It was always the same.
I'm not going to comment on any kind of employment that I've had at any point.
I understand, but I'm just saying but it's always been the same.
Because I'm right.
So your argument is that it's always been the same. You've never gone up. You've never got better benefits. You've never got better pay. It's always been the same. You've never had different freedoms.
My argument is that I believe, from my experience and from what I have read and heard from others, that it's largely homogenous for most of the people who are out there. I'm not saying it doesn't happen that people change jobs and they come up in some way. That does happen, that people change jobs and they find better employers, they find better opportunities. But I'm also saying that for millions of Americans, changing the employer is simply changing the colors of the uniform. And at the end of the day, a lot of the rules are the same from place to place to place. Your boss can determine what uniform you wear.
And
Your
at any
boss can
point, just like Josh said, at any point you can do what he did. He chose to work for himself,
which is fantastic. You see, Josh owns his own. He has his own business. He owns his own means of production.
Yeah.
He is not a rentier, and he does not exploit people or the environment to make his living. To me, Josh is an example of what a business
So is
should be.
most business.
No.
Yes. Corporate business is a very small portion. Most business is private owned proprietorship business across the United States. Small businesses, not corporations.
But
Small businesses who are still affected by the laws that you have, that you want to establish against corporations, mostly affect small businesses in a negative way, not the corporations.
Well,
they're not the bad guy.
We literally have to flip that because we give a lot of subsidies and breaks and sweetheart deals to big corporations. And we need to actually reverse that. The subsidies and the sweetheart deals that we give to big corporations, we should instead be giving to the little guy so they can come up and compete against the big corporation and keep the big corporation competitive. Otherwise, the big corporation squashes everything and becomes almost monopolistic. And then they become a tyrant where they can push their way into a local government and say, we're going to build a headquarters here and we're going to bring 1,500 new jobs, but we don't want to pay any local taxes for 10 years while we're here doing it. Oh, and in year 10 we're going to probably close shop, but so it's ridiculous. What we allow big corporations to do both here in the United States and abroad, when we should really be taking care of little people who have new ideas. Where do you think the new ideas and the innovation are really going to come from?
It always comes from the little guy in the garage.
Right? More often than not. I'm not saying that big corporations don't sometimes have bold ideas.
It's just for most of the time, big corporations have to protect what they have, and new ideas are usually a threat to what they have. I mean, Kodak invented the digital camera.
Yeah.
And saw the digital camera as a threat to their business of making film and did not run with it, did not produce it. This is the late 70s that they developed, that somebody in-house developed the digial camera at Kodak.
Yeah. So I think what we need to do is kind of reverse that. But the reason we can't reverse it is because corporate America has so much money, so much lobbying power, they can literally buy politicians. And the end result is the politicians then do the bidding of the corporation, and the big corporation entrenches its position. And if you're a little guy, good luck to you, because...
I'm going to ask this because Josh posted this, because he did lose his job and started his own business. It was a manufacturing job. I've mentioned the owner of this job before, and I'm guessing what's happened is that Josh lost his job at Trends and then started his own manufacturing job. And I don't even think that Trends is even a company anymore. I'm not real sure exactly what's happened. I lost track of it the past 10 years. But again, I want to ask, what's the difference? Because I know that Trends started as a one person in their garage and became a large company that Josh was employed at. And now Josh has his own company. And Josh, it seems like you're complaining about Trends being big, but at one point they weren't. So if you were to become big, would you be complaining about yourself? I mean, at what point do you start to say that's evil, even though at one point they started small?
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, Walmart at one point was one store in Arkansas.
Sure, absolutely.
And somebody made better choices and became successful. At what point is success evil? At what point are we against success?
I can answer that. Success is evil if it comes at the exploitation of the environment or people. If you're engaged in any form of exploitation or hijacking of a political process, now your success has become evil. So as long as you stay out of worker exploitation and environmental exploitation, and frankly, you stay out of the darn political process, get as rich as you like.
Okay, I think that's a great answer. That's a great, valid answer. So you're saying that that most of the time, that's not what's happening.
I think most of the time, in terms of all the businesses in the country, I think most businesses are operating fairly ethically. There are a lot who I still think take advantage of things like the minimum wage, which I actually find to be now a tool of oppression. It was not intended to be a tool of oppression, but they're paying workers minimum wage because that's all they're compelled to pay. And so now workers can no longer buy the things that they're producing. They can't eat at the restaurants where they're working. It's ludicrous. And we need to change that. And it needs to change across the board all at one time. You can't just change it in Seattle or in New York City or San Francisco and expect it's going to change the world. No, you have to change it across the board. But you also have to do it incrementally so that you don't have all these businesses folding, because there is a process. You have to do it slowly, incrementally across the board. Now, you can't do it too slowly because people have to pay rent and they're starving.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't envy our policymakers in this country, because obviously American workers need a raise.
Because the devil's in the details.
But again, the problem is if you do it too much too quickly, you create all kinds of other problems that are even worse. So,
and by the way, Josh, looking at your comments right now, I would love to hear your story about what you used to do, because that sounds really amazing.
About him making guns.
Whatever the manufacturer is doing, that sounds pretty cool.
Yeah. So, well,
we all got to catch up, do a high school reunion again.
Is we're going to have to drive out to Paso and pay him a visit.
We will. We'll have to do that.
And we'll have to do an episode, or we'll have to tape it.
Yeah, we could do that, actually.
We did it at the range, did we not?
Yeah, we could tape it out there and bring it. So, yeah. Well,
up to you, Josh.
Yeah.
But anyway.
We are inviting ourselves to your home.
But, because
that's the kind of guys we are.
There you go.
Hey, let's have a party at your house. We're going to come.
But getting back to the original question, is at the end of the day, how does all of this change what's happening politically? And I think, first of all, Donald Trump doesn't have to fear a fellow Republican trying to challenge him for the presidency.
Yeah.
I think at this point he is now a shoo-in. In fact, all things being equal, if there were a race today, I think it would be a pretty straight-up race to see whether the Republican or the Democrat would win.
Well, right now, they literally just did that. I saw that in the news that, who was it? Fox News did it? Somebody did it. And right now, they're saying that if the election was ran right now, Trump would lose to both Bernie Sanders and
Joe Biden.
Mm-hmm. And that he's just barely edging out Warren.
Probably,
and
Beto and all them. Yeah. So, but ultimately, I think it would be a pretty straight up race. Unless
the Russians got involved again.
Right. What I want to see, well, there's that wild card because they're still out there, right?
Yeah.
What I want to see is I want to see a political candidate, and this includes Donald Trump, but I want to see a political candidate put forward a vision for the next 4 years. I haven't seen this from anyone, perhaps other than Bernie Sanders, and right now I don't know what his vision specifically is either. Nobody has gotten into any kind of specific details. Bernie Sanders has spoken very generally so far. I have not seen anything from Donald Trump. But ultimately, I am looking for someone to articulate a vision. I am ready to put all this garbage behind us. I am not going to support Donald Trump because of principle, and I don't believe he should be president. But that's my personal opinion on the matter.
That's what the show is our personal opinion,
right? But at the end of the day, I would still like Donald Trump to have a platform and to say again. I would go back to what I was hoping he would do in 2016 is say, I'm going to rebuild this country. I'm going to bring that money, the $4 or $5 trillion from overseas. I'm going to bring it home. We're going to take a quarter of that. We're going to tell these corporations they have to buy government bonds, but those bonds will pay a profit at the end when they mature. And we're going to use that $1 trillion or $2 trillion, however much it would be, to purchase infrastructure projects across the United States.
So I'm really getting tired of all the potholes on my way to and from work.
Right, because at the end of the day, the government is taking in massive tax receipts. And apparently we are the ones now who are paying the bulk of those tax receipts. And yet our roads, and our infrastructure continues to crumble. What are we buying for all this money?
Yeah. I've always been an advocate of just flat tax rate. Just everybody just pays this percentage of your income. Done. There's no, well, I got this deduction and that and reduce this and that. And just pay this amount. Done. It's just well, if you want to say below a certain thing, then you don't. But like, just the idea of there should not be any way of not paying.
Yeah, I like the idea of a progressive system, but the problem is the progressive system, and it would probably be the same under any other system, has been infused with so many loopholes.
Yeah.
That people can move money around and do
just
clever schemes.
Just flat tax, no loopholes. Done. Start there, and then.
I would say progressive tax system where your first $10,000 or $12,000 are tax free, and so on. But no loopholes.
No loopholes.
You and I would both agree. Let's end all of these silly loopholes, because what those loopholes actually do is they actually inflate the price of things. Take a look at solar power, right?
Yeah.
There's no reason why this state shouldn't be all connected to a solar panel grid. We should be generating the majority of our electricity using solar. Every single home should have solar on top of it. The problem is, and this is where I agree with you, government has been involved with the solar industry. It has been subsidizing the solar industry. And the end result is the price to put solar panels on your roof is high because it takes into account the tax incentives.
Which is the same thing that's happening with healthcare. They know that there's deep pockets so they can charge more.
Exactly.
If there wasn't the deep pockets, it would be a reasonable price. As soon as there's a deep pocket somewhere, you up the price because now somebody can afford to pay it. That's always been my biggest thing of the more we give government to pay for us, the higher the prices will be because now there's a deeper pocket for people to charge.
Yeah. Well, I think government healthcare system can manage that differently. I think we can set some limits on the depth of those
dream
pockets.
world?
But I also think that it's the responsibility of society to care for one another. I am my brother's keeper. And as a result, I want to pay taxes to help with your health care if you need it, and vice versa, so that whenever a person has a health care need, they're not bankrupted by that need. I don't want to live in a world where a person is bankrupted because they get sick. I just don't want to live in that world. I don't like that. And I'm willing to pay to live in that world. And at the end of the day, I don't see why we have 50 different states in this country. Why don't we have a libertarian state where, like Texas, where you folks who want small government can go live there, and let's just see how that turns out. And those of us who want socialism, let's all live in
we get to turn away the people
California.
who are like, no, you don't believe what we do. You don't get to live here.
Yeah, I don't know how we do it, but maybe say this is how the state is going to be run, and if you don't like it, this is probably not where you want to settle down.
But I mean, when you break that down, isn't that the same thing like this city? Could you break it down to a city level? Would that not be logical?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just. This is really just a thought experiment.
Yeah.
Why not let the libertarians have a libertarian paradise, whether it's a nation or a state or a city? Why not let the libertarians live the way they want to live?
Why not let the fascists?
You know what? Let it happen. As long as they're not oppressing other people, naturally you have to maintain civil rights. But, if they want to live in a community where it's all a bunch of, fascists living together, being fascist to each other, I'm sure they'll hate it. I'm sure it will collapse. It'll fail. But let them have that experiment. Let's take all the fascists and put them on an island. That would be the greatest favor ever. So, yeah.
Deport people for their beliefs.
Well, no, we're going to give them the opportunity.
Leave it to the socialists to deport people for their beliefs.
Build their own paradise. Build your own paradise. We're going to give you, a whole state, and we're going to build a wall around it, or probably you'll build a wall.
That worked for Israel,
right? But at the end of the day, I'm okay with letting people live the way they want to live, but that's not the country that we live in. We live in a country.
It's a country that started out though. That was literally how it started out, that you had the states and you had states' rights. States' rights doesn't mean slavery. States' rights doesn't mean racism. States' rights literally means states' rights. That state could have their laws that the federal government had very little to do, so that you could have that state that you were to have the laws that you want. That didn't work.
That's a great point, because you look at Pennsylvania or look at Massachusetts, it was a Puritan colony. You had to be basically a member of the Puritan religious faith, this Calvinist religious denomination, in order to really even live there. And if you were rejected, you went down and lived in Rhode Island. And then, you had Pennsylvania, which was the Quakers. That's how my ancestors came to this country in the 17th century. And then you had colonies like Virginia, which was really all about making money. That was the charter of Virginia, was about making money, and so on. And yeah, we had that up until the Civil War. So.
All right. Well, this has been A Valid Answer with Scott and Marshall. You can catch us on Sundays at 5, Mondays at 4 on currentcast.com. You can catch us right here on Facebook. Just search for Currentcast or search for A Valid Answer. We also post these to our iTunes podcast, so you can follow us there, and on YouTube, search for A Valid Answer. The more views we get up, the more we're heard. We don't make any money. So, I mean, and until you start giving, that's right. If you believe in us, you can donate to us. The
email us
plug.
at avalidanswer@gmail.com.
avalidanswer@gmail.com. and let us know if you want us to say your business name right here as a sponsor of A Valid Answer.
You bet.
Yeah. So until next time, this has been Scott
And Marshall.
Talk to you guys later.